No, what we're going to do is hop into the actual thing for this month. I want to start with, we're breaking the rules this month, so I want to start with a little video. Are we seeing it? Breaking the rules? Oh, great. Okay. No, let's play it. This is Joseph, who is the person who originated 52 frames. I can't pronounce his last name, but he lives in Israel. And he's the originator, and he puts out a series of videos every time we have a new challenge. And this one is on breaking the rules, so we'll just start with it.
All right, now that we've covered a whole bunch of rules, let's quickly go through some examples of how to break it wide open. And the answer of when to break the rules is also pretty wide open. I mean, at the end of the day, you have your own artistic sense and self to craft your own vision and story of what you see in front of you and how you want to take it. And I not only invite you, but I encourage you to try and completely break down these barriers, visual or otherwise, to give over a different angle and make people think, because that really, at the end of the day, is what art is all about. So I'm just going to fly through a couple of examples of how we can break the rules. Horizon line. That's the first composition technique that I taught. That's 101, super basic, very important. Always keep your horizon straight, unless you don't want to. That's one of my, or used to be anyways, one of my go-to styles was 45 degrees. I still do it sometimes. Just rotate the camera 45 degrees and it just gives an effect that leaves the viewer, turning your head a little bit off kilter, trying to figure out what are they looking at, Create a little bit of chaos, create a little bit of confusion, and that adds to your story immediately. Leading lines. When would you not want to use leading lines? Well, sometimes you're shooting a subject straight up, straight forward. So there is no depth. You don't need to have leading lines, or you may not have lines in your scene at all. You want to create this sense of chaos, not of order. You don't want the viewer's eye to be led into any given point in the scene. You want to create chaos and movement. So that's when you should completely abandon this notion of leading lines. Hard light and soft light we really covered in a previous chapter, but I wanted to just give you these two quick examples that I saw. How about no light at all? Have your subject basking in shadow, or just shoot at high noon and create some really cool contrast along the way. We said you need to look into the frame, right? Well, have your subject look out of the frame. I think this specifically is a really nice technique that often works even without making the viewer feel uncomfortable, but it definitely gives a different look than your typical portrait. Have the right amount of headspace around your subject, I said, or don't. Have a ridiculous amount of space around your subject. Have them just be a dot in your entire composition. And again, you will give a different story, usually one in this case of, I want to say vulnerability, but it doesn't have to be. Just, this one, longing comes to mind, or maybe loneliness, or maybe deep in thought, feeling a little bit small in the world, not necessarily in a bad way. But yeah, a lot of headspace, I think, creates some real visual interest. And lastly, just be weird. You want to crop something in the middle, crop it. If your subject content is already weird, then you kind of have more license to just break the rules and do whatever you want. I mean, that'll only add to the weirdness. Create whatever color combinations you want. Shoot upside down. Have your subject upside down. The point is that the art and the craft here is your own to take on, and I encourage you to really think outside the box. Definitely follow these guidelines as much as possible in order to free you, I think, to understand composition enough that you can at least maybe in a somewhat educated way decide when is the time to break the rules and just bring something a little bit different to the viewer. I hope these photos serve as some good examples of when to break the rules.
Okay. So any comments? Anybody? The one he mentioned, high noon, was just the challenge the other day. Last week, I think it was, for 52 frames. And Russ, being so literal, was outside right at noon.
Yeah, me too.
And in Michigan, of course, we probably should be Central Time Zone. We're on daylight savings time, so noon did not give us the same effect as noon.
What was the subject? What was the challenge?
High noon.
Oh,
Shoot at high noon.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, 52 frames. I've been having a ball with it. I know Evie's doing it.
I'm doing it.
Joan's doing it. Several people, Richard Combs, Becky is into 52 frames now, and who else? Richard Johnson, I believe, and I'm probably missing somebody, but okay. So now let me get the actual PowerPoint going here. Make sure I do it right this time. There we go. Okay. Let's see if I did the right combination. Seeing it?
We are.
Oh, great. How about that? I think last month when we did this before, I mentioned that I do a weekly Zoom with my student teachers at Grand Valley. And for some reason, things just weren't working before, and my students had to bail me out, which was really embarrassing. So anyway, Mr. Tech. Okay, we already saw Joseph, so we can skip by that. Okay, the rules. Again, I put AI to work and used GPT-3, the chatbot, and asked it what the rules of photography were. And this is the list it gave me. So rule of thirds, and as you can see, quite a few of them here. So we're not going to talk about all those, thank goodness. We're going to narrow it down to 10, but actually I think it's 9. I don't understand the only amateurs crop their photos, but anyway. So rule of thirds. I like using the rule of thirds, but there are times, as you can see here, where you get some pretty strong images by not. Anybody have any comments on rule of thirds? Just jump right in here if anybody has anything to say. So
I generally do, but sometimes an image just speaks to be centered.
Yeah.
So,
And
or terribly off-centered. If you're looking for a real minimalist
right. Yeah.
approach, sometimes it's real off-centered. So
Yeah, I was really impressed with the was it the assigned subject last month was minimalist, and yeah, I think we had some great images in that. So anyway, yeah, rule of thirds. That's one it's fine to break it. Don't center your subject. Again, kind of the same thing, not going with the rule of thirds, I think. And most of these images are images I grabbed off the 52 Frames website. We have Jesus joining us. Hi, Jesus. So, yeah, don't necessarily have to center your subject. Why aren't we moving on? Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay, fill the frame with your subject. The one on the left I grabbed from 52 Frames, and as you can see here, it's kind of minimal. The one on the right was the one I put in for the club competition on minimalist. When we were in Florida, after being in Michigan with no sun, I was just fascinated every morning by the light coming through the kitchen blinds in the little bungalow that we rented. And I don't think I took as many shots as Kelly did in Africa, but close maybe, of my coffee cups. I just had fun with the shadows and the light coming through. So, but again, you don't necessarily have to fill the frame. Rule of odds. This was one I had not heard of before. I guess I was kind of familiar with it, but it was one of the challenges again in 52 frames was to break the rule of odds. And as you can see here, the one on the left, just two people. And the one on the right is one I did. This was actually one I did for the high noon challenge. And as you can see, that sun is definitely not where high noon should be. But anyway, I have a rather eclectic backyard, and those beer growlers are hanging in my tree in the backyard. And as you can see, there's four of them. So had anybody heard of the rule of odds before?
Oh, sure.
No.
Yeah.
Odd numbers are more pleasing.
Oh, odd
Right.
numbers.
It's 1, 3, 5.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But it could get out of control at 19, couldn't it?
It could. It might get out of control after 5.
I think so. We did have one with, the challenge was called Chaos. And I think I had like 60 images in the frame. So that was definitely out of control. So, okay. Come on, screen. There we go. Avoid blur. This is one that I really struggle with. I hate blur in a photo, and I realize you can get some really cool effects. I love the one on the left. I assume maybe that was a long exposure. What do you think?
Huh?
They're probably, well, I guess you can create blur
What?
in
Oh,
post.
yeah. We'll let him in.
Kathy, you're off mute.
Yes, I'm not sure if that was created, in an app or if that was an actual long exposure, but I love that shot. And of course, the one
It's a sense of motion, and so there are times when it's actually very effective to.
Mhm. Yeah.
But that's different. This is obviously intentional blur,
Right.
as opposed to a soft photo of let's say a butterfly on a flower, where it's out of focus because it wasn't intentional blur.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
just a matter of not being in focus. And so there's definitely a difference between those two.
Right. So I love that one on the left anyway. The one in the center, of course, the moving object with the stationary person. And I assume the one at the right was panning with the dog. So, and these were all from 52 Frames website also. So, rule of space.
What is the rule of space?
Leaving space for your subject. Probably very similar to, looking into the frame as opposed to looking out of the frame.
So the guy on the left is looking out of the frame. He's on the
Right. Yeah. So he doesn't have the space in front of him, I think is what they were implying on that one. So, the one on the right is just one from my backyard. That again was taken during the high noon challenge. And just kind of filling the frame with it, as opposed to leaving space around it. So, and Russ's big bugaboo. I hate tilted horizons, but there are times when it's effective. So, the one on the left is again from 52 Frames album. The one on the right, again, I took more pictures during the high noon challenge than I think I've ever taken on any of the challenge. This was at John Ball Park. And when I had the horizon straight, the gym equipment there just didn't look right to me. So I tilted the horizon, and I guess I don't mind if it's really tilted. It's when it's just slightly tilted that really bothers me. But so. And I know that is kind of a big trend now. A lot of people with their cell phones like to shoot with the angles and so on. So, Again, any comments from anybody?
I'm with you on that. If it's done so that it's obvious that it's intentional,
Right.
but when it's a couple of degrees off, it's like it just breaks them.
Yeah.
Like,
It gives me the shivers.
yeah.
So anyway, keep the horizon straight. Shoot at eye level. Last week's challenge was get low, it was called, which was basically shooting from a low angle. And the left one and the center one are from 52 frames. I love the one on the left. I'm not quite sure where he's standing, but I hope it's not a railroad track, but or the subway. And the one on the right is just one I did in my backyard a year or so ago. I just laid my camera down on the ground and used a shutter release to get that. So, and break multiple rules. This is one I did for 52 frames also. And the challenge was break the rules. So I have a tilted horizon looking out of the frame on both sides. Oh yeah, here we go. Blurred image, broke the rule of thirds, broke the rule of odds, looking out of the frame. Oh, Joe Timmer rule. I've talked about Joe Timmer a couple of times. I don't know if Jen, are you familiar with Joe Timmer?
Name sounds familiar, but
Okay, he was a really, when I was in the Grand Rapids Camera Club like 30 years ago when Larry Heidenberg and I were both young, Joe was probably the top photographer.
okay.
And he always made a statement that was, people are vertical. And so I just kind of threw myself at an angle there to break the Joe Timmer rule, but and tilted horizon and looking out of the frame and so on. The lights on that, on the tree, by the way, and on the banister, that was done in Luminar Neo, and they have it's an AI feature in Luminar called Relight, where you can put the star crosses on any light and you can control how many and intensity and so on. So I also use that filter in that photo. So I think that was it. And the challenge for next month then is to take some images where you break the rules, and again, submit it to me, and we'll put them into the PowerPoint and share them again. So, okay, let's stop the share here.